Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to the show today. It is Monday, July 20th, 2015 here, and pardon my laughter, but I'm watching the corporate media feed where everybody is out there trying to get a war with Iran going. We don't care if everybody wants peace. We don't care if the majority of the American people are sick and tired of war. We know what's best for Israel, and by golly, we're going to give Israel what Israel wants. And, of course, the oil companies want, and the money junkies want, and all the rest of it. So it's almost, if we weren't risking a nuclear world war, it would be laughable to see how hard all of Israel's whores in both the Congress and the media are trying to convince everyone that, yes, we've got to go after Iran. Iran is the evil one. They're the source of all evil on the planet. You know, Iran steals socks from your dryer. Iran is tearing the tags off your couch cushions. Iran made Eve eat that apple, and so forth and so on. So, anyway, moving on here. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room. Going to be talking a little bit more about what's going on with Iran a little bit later in the show, but we got a few things we want to head on up right here at the top. As I mentioned, this is July 20th, 2015. This is the anniversary of the landing of Apollo 11 on the moon. It's one of those events in life where you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when it happened and how exciting it all was. And is also the anniversary of the landing of Viking 1 on Mars. And by the way, that's not a coincidence. Little inside story. Viking was originally scheduled to land on Mars on July 4th, 1976, the bicentennial of the United States. And the orbiters had shown the pre-selected landing sites were not safe. It was a very high-risk endeavor. And as a matter of fact, when Viking 2 set down on Mars, it missed a Volkswagen-sized boulder by mere feet that would have toppled the ship over and destroyed it. And, of course, remembering what happened to the Russian soft lander, which failed seconds after it touched down, everybody was being cautious. And the team leaders for Viking were getting all these angry phone calls from the White House. You will put that thing down on July 4th because we want to salute the flag and everything. And the mission leaders stood their ground because they understood if they rushed and put it down on the 4th of July and it failed, it would be a huge political embarrassment. So they missed that window, and then the White House said, well, put it down on the 20th, the anniversary of the moon landing, and we'll sort of call it even at that. And that's why Viking 1 touched down on Mars on July 20th. Had nothing to do with the science, everything to do with politics, which continued to stain, distort, and warp the mission from then on, including the downplaying of the findings by Dr. Gilbert Levin and the labeled release experiment that said, yes, there is indigenous microbial life on Mars alive, at least back in 1976. And all this hemming and hawing about maybe, could have, a long time ago, might be, and everything we've been getting ever since is just a reminder that NASA stands for never a straight answer. And a lot of scientists around the world have looked at the raw data from the labeled release experiment, and they're saying this is exactly what you should see, you know, for a positive result. And we know that the negative result NASA relied on from the GCMS to say, no, we didn't find life, was completely bogus because of the high perchlorate content of the Martian soil. But NASA, it never admits that they're wrong. They certainly are not going to admit they were wrong about human-caused global warming, and not going to admit that they were wrong about life on Mars. I remember not too long ago they had this wonderful show about the Challenger disaster and the huge uphill fight Richard Feynman, had to deal with to say that NASA was lying about the resiliency and thermal qualities of those O-rings in the solid rocket boosters. And he was only able to hammer the point home when he literally did an experiment right in the hearing room with ice water, saying, see, it loses its flexibility just at 32 degrees, let alone for, 30 below, which was what had happened the night before. NASA is, the new NASA, is a political institution. And like all political institutions, it protects its image. even to the point of cover-up and deception. Now, speaking of cover-up and deception here, they're still going on about this Chattanooga shooting. It's now an act of domestic terrorism. It's those gosh darn Muslims. It's ISIS. It's Islam. Everybody's out there unanimous on that opinion. Except, of course, for MSNBC, which is sort of evading the whole Muslim connection in favor of calling this guy a Southern gun nut. See, this is what happens when you let people have guns. These bad things happen. You know, he's a gun nut. He's Southern. We've got to demonize them. And they're all out there basically saying that, really, you should believe what we're telling you about this guy. You should never, ever doubt the authenticity of anything we tell you. And, okay, yes, we lied about the torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, and we did lie about that Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, and we did lie about Saddam's nuclear weapons and all the rest of it. But you should never, ever, ever, ever begin to have an inkling of a doubt today when we tell you what's going on. Well, of course, we do have that doubt, and for a darn good reason, because over the weekend it came out to nobody's surprise that the Chattanooga shooter was dealing with depression and had been on antidepressants for years. Once again, we look at an act of senseless mass violence and we find the one common factor are these mind-distorting medications. So this guy was on antidepressants. No other. They weren't all Muslim. They weren't all Southern. They weren't all gun nuts. They weren't anything except either on or withdrawing from these medications. And it's when you're withdrawing from prescription antidepressants that you can become really, really unstable. Now, over at whatreallyhappened.com in the right-hand margin, you will see this image of a giant capsule, which is the icon to take you to a resource page about all these cases of perfectly normal, well-behaved human beings whose doctors said, we're going to put you on this medication because it's the latest fashion trend and I'm getting a kickback from the pharmaceutical companies. And then all of a sudden, these people on these medications flip out and commit suicide or acts of violence. There's a link from that page over to ssristories.org. And it's got all these case studies, and the one that really stuck in my mind was there was this kid was in school. They said, oh, he's got ADHD, which the guy who came up with ADHD admitted was a made-up, fictitious disease to sell medication. They put this kid on the medication, and he tries to commit suicide. They get to him in time and save his life, and when it's all over, they come in and say, why did you try and kill yourself? And he says, I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I couldn't stop. That's not psychology. That's a chemical reaction. I mean, when you see all these public service commercials against the illegal drugs, they always talk about how these drugs can trip off suicide. LSD can make you cause suicide, and meth can make you cause suicide. Yeah, and they can. And the big lie is this idea that equally potent prescription, corporate-produced mind-altering chemicals cannot, because that is not true. Now, out in California, another multiple murder. 5 people killed in a California home by a guy named Martin Martinez. And you probably didn't hear about it on the corporate TV news unless you live in that area, because with a name like Martinez, they can't say it's a Muslim. They can't say he's a Southern gun nut. It's politically incorrect to talk about crimes committed by Hispanics, because that's what we're slapping Donald Trump around for. And that's why you're not hearing about this one. They're selectively promoting the stories that promote a particular given agenda. All right, we're coming up here on our first commercial break. When we come back, now we're going to get into the details about what's going on over with Iran and just how Israel and all of Israel's whores are drooling for a war with Iran as long as somebody else's kids have to be killed and crippled in it. We'll be right back. Hi, America, welcome back to the show. So let's talk about what's going on over in Iran. Now, as you know, last week, President Obama sent the Iran deal up to the United Nations Security Council for ratification, and not surprisingly, the Security Council has endorsed the deal. There were no vetoes. And Congress is just in an uproar. How dare you let the United Nations get in the way of our destroying this deal for almighty Israel? Harumph, harumph, harumph. Senator John Conyon said Obama's decision to go to the United Nations before Congress gets a chance to scuttle the deal is an affront to the American people. And the good senator is absolutely flat out wrong. It is Congress trying to derail the Iran deal at Israel's bidding that is the affront to the American people. And Israel's minions are all over the net saying Iran is the global sponsor of terror. Forget what we said about Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Iran is behind all the terror attacks. This coming from the country that did the Levant affair, tried to blame Egypt for the attack on the USS Liberty, staged the hijacking that led to the raid on Tebbe, tricked Reagan into bombing Libya. And they're out there saying Iran is the problem. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. History's against them. Well, apparently Congress is off the hook for tinkering because now we're getting word that at least one group within Iran's parliament is digging in their heels over aspects of the deal that have nothing whatsoever to do with the development of nuclear weapons. They're responding to those last-second added limitations on Iran's conventional arms, which were never supposed to be part of the P5+1. And technically and legally they're correct. Politically, I think they're walking right into Israel's trap. Because Israel wants this deal dead so that they can go on and start a war with Iran that American kids are going to have to be killed and crippled finishing up. Like Israel has done so many times before. But I'm sure over there in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's jumping and down saying, I'm going to get my war, I'm going to get my war. Now, Ron Paul's come out with an article, and as usual, it's level-headed, sane, analytical, saying that the Iran agreement does boost peace, and of course, it is a serious impediment to the neocon agenda, which is the new politically correct word for the war party. And, of course, that's why everybody's against this deal. They don't really want a deal. They went through the motions of making a deal to reassure all of you that really we didn't want a war, but we have to have one, and it's all Iran's fault. AIPAC is out there screaming that they want to kill this deal to make way for a better Iran deal, and yet they don't actually seem to have an idea of what constitutes a better Iran deal. They just want this deal killed. They want sanctions to remain. They want more sanctions. They want the Iranian people collectively punished for not doing as the U.S. and Israel tell them to do. And a reminder, collective punishment is a war crime under international law. They don't really want a deal. They never did. They went through the motions to make it look like they were trying to find a path to peace, so that when the inevitable backlash against the war begins, they can say, we tried to find a way to make this work peacefully, but the Iranians were just being completely unreasonable, about us putting spy cameras in all their bedrooms and bathrooms and everything to make sure they're not building neutron bombs in the toilet, which is what it comes down to. Now, there's an article over here in Wake Up From Your Slumber that basically is telling it like it is. Netanyahu has mobilized his fifth column here in the United States of America. The blogs are just crawling with all these megaphonies. All these Jewish students are getting their college scholarships from the government of Israel to post the propaganda, which is why you never see them having to work down there in the hamburger joints. But they're out there trying to kill this deal. And at the same time they're trying to kill the deal, Israel is now requesting that the U.S. government, because they went ahead and made the deal over Israel's objections, that Israel is deserving of compensation for being so blatantly disobeyed by Obama. They want a major increase in military funding coming from you, the already overstressed taxpayer. Big mistake. They actually want a squadron of the F-35s. I don't have a problem with that. Give them the F-35. Give them the F-22. Give them the Independence-class littoral combat ships. Let them have fun. Let them see if they can fix all the problems. But I've noticed something over the last couple of decades. No matter what happens, Israel says they're owed more money. They demand money. You must give us money because. The sun comes up, Israel demands money. The sun goes down, Israel demands money. The moon waxes, Israel demands money. The moon wanes, Israel demands money. The weather is sunny, Israel demands money. The weather is rainy, Israel demands money. I am beginning to see a consistent pattern here, and I think we all need to look at it just a little bit. Now, one of the reasons that Netanyahu has gone pedal to the metal on all of this is the public resistance against what he's doing. Netanyahu is just used to this idea of his government telling the other governments what to do, and the other government's doing it, and that's the end of it. But the public backlash, the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement are all becoming a real issue because neither Netanyahu or his whores in other nations' governments can continue to pretend that they're coming from a position of moral rightness or legal legitimacy. And illustrating that is an article over in Forward, which is a pro-Israel publication. But they're out there saying Europe has had enough of Benjamin Netanyahu, and they're coming out with it. Why? What did we do wrong? Why is there all this resistance to Israel? We're just innocent and and again, leading back to this thing that opposition to the policies of Israel's government represents Jew hatred and anti-Semitism, which makes about as much sense as trying to dismiss criticism of the Nazis as being German hate. And yet they are today all over the net. You obviously hate the Jewish people here, and that's why you say these things. You're an anti-Semite. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm anti-jerk, and there is a difference. What's going on is everyone is tired of Israel, a nuclear-armed state that tried to sell nuclear weapons to the former government of South Africa, yet continues to pretend to be this helpless victim that you have to give money and weapons to. We're sick and tired of hearing about whatever it is that did or did not happen in Nazi Germany before we were all born as an excuse to tell us not to pay attention to what Israel is doing to their neighbors here and now today before our very eyes. It isn't just Europe that's sick and tired of Netanyahu. I think pretty much we all are. We'll be right back. We've got a phone call waiting after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. And even as this deal moves forward, it passed unanimously at the United Nations Security Council, and it looks like Israel and Saudi Arabia aren't even going to wait for the deal to fail. We are hearing more and more commentary coming from Israel's government and the Saudi government that they're just going to go ahead and start a war on Iran anyway just because we can do it. And we know the generous American taxpayer will just give us all the weapons that we need to accomplish whatever it is we feel like we need to accomplish there. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I watched that Greg Hunter interviews. I watch him all the time, and I was so disappointed because he's like, the State Department says Iran's the number one sponsor of terror. I'm like, well, as soon as you start quoting the State Department, you lose all credibility.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Benghazi, right?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody who's out there pushing the agenda, inevitably they go back to citing as the authoritative source a comment made from a gang of proven liars. They're raising on a busted flush here. They don't actually have any evidence that Iran is any kind of a problem. They're resorting to a call to authority. Well, this official government spokesman says this. Yeah, is that the same official government spokesman told you Saddam had nuclear weapons, or that Lusitania wasn't carrying bombs and munitions, or that the unemployment's only 5.6%? You shouldn't be going back to these people. Again, as you say, it undermines their own credibility to keep going back to the same proven liars.
Well, it's the same State Department that brought us the coup in the Ukraine. It's the same State Department that did the Benghazi, missing $5 billion with Hillary at the helm. Don't matter who's at the helm. It's just all corrupt. I mean, it's just insane to use that as like a reference.
Well, that's all they've got. That's all they've got is basically, they have given themselves all the awards and the accolades and, plaques on the wall and statues in the office, and they're basically waving them around like, idols in some pagan temple saying, the gods have decreed and you will believe us. And we don't. We don't believe them. If the government told me it was going to be a sunny day, I would feel morally obligated to take an umbrella. That's how bad their credibility is right now. I don't trust a thing the government says. It's your job as an American to go out and see if it's sunny out. Don't listen to the Mockingbird media, Washington, or anything. Hey, Mike, you know what's it's funny? I still want to know where the ISIS got those Toyota trucks built in Texas for U.S. Special Forces. The State Department must have delivered them in bulk, huh? Probably from another one of those accidental, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, airdrops of supplies into ISIS by the United States. They got caught doing it again. We got the video from that on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. It's being seen. The U.S. and Israel are supplying ISIS, and they keep, it was a mistake. Just a typical snafu. You should not read anything into the fact that we seem to be dropping more weapons onto the so-called terrorist forces than on those people who are supposedly on our side fighting against the terrorist forces. Hey, Mike, I want to change topics real quick. I want to talk about the video you have. People need to watch that pedophile video from Australia, 60 Minutes. I mean, that tells you all you need to know about cover-ups, corruption, Boys Town over here. People need to really, figure out what's going on. Well, I hadn't put a lot of focus on that up until now because I'm still trying to figure out what it is, but I am still starting to put a little more focus on there. Apparently, there is a senior member of the British Parliament who's now under investigation for molesting a bunch of children. And I think the value of these stories is not necessarily to demean or insult anybody, and certainly not to re-victimize the victims, but I'm beginning to understand that the people who seek these positions of power, authority, and wealth really are seriously mentally ill, and it's time to start calling them out on their symptoms. Well, you got pedophiles to the left, warmongers to the right, and you know who's in the center? Stuck in the middle again. Well, the bankers are in the middle, No, the bankers are on top of everything. The bankers are ruling everything. Money is the organizing instrument for human civilization. And I'm afraid on that one that Mr. X was wrong. War is subservient to money as the organizing influence of society. Hey, Mike, I noticed on that Chattanooga shooting, all of a sudden, like all the governors or whatever are going to look into arming the soldiers, the National Guard there. I'm like, you put that into with Jade Helm and everything coming, maybe September will be a stock crash. Who knows? I mean, maybe this is all linked somehow. I have a different point of view. Why were all these trained military people on U.S. military bases denied guns in the first place? It doesn't make sense. This is their job, to be constantly familiar with their weapons and have them at hand. And I think the reason that all these people were disarmed on the military bases goes back to that Fort Hood shooting, which was blamed on a convenient Muslim. But the inside word is that there were a bunch of returning Iraq veterans who were told they were being sent right back. They thought their term of enlistment was over. And under stop-loss, the government said, no, we're going to keep you for another couple of years, and you're going right over there back to Iraq because we need experienced veterans out there in positions of leadership. And it triggered a firefight, but they didn't want the public to understand that our rank-and-file military have been pushed to the edge of a revolt, so they dropped the blame on some convenient Muslim guy. What about SSRIs? That's a major problem. We had an Iraq War veteran on the show a few years back who was just saying that they're handing out that stuff like candy over there. The Pentagon is spending more money on psychiatric medication for our troops than they spend on Black Hawk helicopters. Because these kids aren't dummies. They understand, despite all the saturating military propaganda, these kids understand these are not good wars. They're not moral wars. They're not wars to defend the United States against a foreign enemy. We're going into other people's countries and stealing their wealth. And a lot of these kids really are having trouble dealing with that. So the government's just doping them up with SSRIs, and they're handing them out like M&Ms. And these kids come back from the war zone addicted to this stuff. And then everybody wonders why so many of these veterans are having problems readjusting to normal society. All wars are bank wars. Absolutely. Absolutely they are. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to Iran. As you know, there have been crippling sanctions against Iran to keep them from getting parts for their war. Of course, sanctions don't apply to Israel because Israel's above the laws of man. I mean, that's been their attitude all along here. And I found this story back from last year, where the U.S. government was investigating the fact that Israel was selling military equipment to Iran in defiance of the sanctions. Because if Israel's the only one that is selling this equipment to Iran, they can charge whatever price they want and make oodles and oodles and oodles of money. And so, yeah, Israeli arms dealers were caught twice sending spare parts for fighter planes to Iran. Needless to say, this investigation by the U.S. government went absolutely nowhere. Because Israel's above the law. You just don't understand. Israel can do what they want. Laws are just for you cattle, for you herd, you livestock. You have to obey the rules. Now, Finland is doing a massive military buildup at their border with Russia. Everybody's moving hardware in there. Everybody in government and banking wants these, the defense contractors want these wars. They're just looking for a starting time and some way to drop the blame for it on the other guy. That's what's going on. Ukrainian forces have shelled Donetsk yet again, violation of the ceasefire, violation of the Minsk Accord. They shelled a hospital. That's where we are right now. Kiev is shelling the hospitals in the eastern Ukrainian republics. Now, as I mentioned before, once again, the U.S. military has been caught airdropping supplies into ISIS. It's a mistake, really, just a simple snap. All those Middle Eastern people look the same when you look down on them from the top. It's very easy to do. Another mistake, U.S. airstrikes killed Allied soldiers up in Afghanistan. The gang that couldn't shoot or drop straight. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about all this push for wars with Iran, war with China, war with everybody. Let's just stop nitpicking and say the United States is trying to start a war with everybody to force them back into slavery to the U.S. dollar, the petrodollar, GMO seeds, whatever else is going in that package of world domination. And so not too surprisingly, we're seeing the Pentagon out there screaming about Russia's new satellite, the Cosmos 2504, which went up March 31st of this year. And they're alarmed because it's maneuvering. It's changing its orbital path. They're not allowed to do that. They're supposed to leave their satellites where we can shoot them down easily. This is a provocation. This is a threat. Okay, so just what does that XB-37B robotic shuttle do that is anywhere less provocative? It is very clear that the U.S. is planning to militarize space. That's actually been on the military's agenda ever since the days of Sputnik. And I don't think they realize just how dangerous it's going to be. Now, if you saw the Sandra Bullock, George Clooney movie Gravity, brilliant effects, by the way, the scenario that gets them into the story is not without merit. Because when you have down here on Earth and something like a warplane or a rocket or whatever explodes in midair, the pieces all fall to the ground, that's the end of the story. When you have things in orbit that explode, many of those pieces just go into different orbits. They're still up there. It's shrapnel. If we actually get into a shooting war in orbit, where things are shooting other things, and all that debris is flying around too small to be able to track, we could literally turn low Earth orbit into a no-man's land through which we're not going to ever be able to launch any more spacecraft. But it is a common feature among people who promote war. They want victory now, and they don't care what the long-term costs are. Whether it is an unusable space over our heads, depleted uranium with a half-life of 4.5 billion years, areas of the planet still too toxic to go into because of Agent Orange, they don't care. They just want to win now, today, here, for the glory of the flag and the fatherland, or the motherland, or whatever it is they're calling it this time. The people who are in favor of war do not think long-term what is good for the earth. They just want to plant their flag on somebody else's money, and they'll be happy. They'll get their little medals and their ribbons and their decorations and go home. Now, with the U.S. obvious development of anti-satellite weapons, which they have, this robotic shuttle, which is going up for a year at a time and nobody knows what it's doing, Russia is justified in being a little bit concerned and not just sit there and wait for the big surprise to fall down on their heads from the sky. We know that in addition to the ballistic missile system the U.S. has deployed, they have what they're calling the fractional orbital bombardment system, which is sort of a lower altitude version of the ballistic missiles. We now know they're talking about low-level cruise missile deployment, plus the submarine force, plus everything else. What is Russia, or for that matter, Iran or any other country supposed to do with an obviously belligerent United States plowing all of its resources and developing new wonder weapons? Sit back and wait for them to hit? I don't think so. Now, the good news is that the United States is making the same exact strategic mistake the Third Reich did, an over-reliance on high-technology wonder weapons. And as we already saw with that Donald Cook incident, or from the horror stories coming out of the F-22 and the F-35, it's a huge waste of money and it's not producing an effective weapons platform, which is exactly what brought Germany down at the end of World War II. All right, let's grab ourselves a couple of phone calls. Dee in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, how are you today?
I'm doing all right for a Monday.
That's a rhetorical question. I don't know why I asked it. Anyway, quick, Ukrainian Agony. It's a new film that was just premiered in, I believe it was Berlin. And it's an incredible documentary about some German film crew who kind of went in at great risk and peril to their own health and well-being, and just, got the war from the other side.
Okay, what's the name of the film again?
Ukrainian Agony. And there's a nice 10-minute, it's not nice at all, I take that word back, but there's a 10-minute teaser on YouTube that anybody can watch, and it is so compelling. And, what can I say? It's a sad state of affairs.
Well, I'm looking at the teaser right now, and I am going to post it to whatreallyhappened.com, and I wish them a lot of well. And something, we see that. Here's an exercise for all the listeners to do. Okay, go into Google image search and look for images of all these countries the United States has invaded from before the invasion or the coup d'etat or the drone strike. See what life was like there. Then get images of the same places from today. And you will come to understand that not only has the United States not, in fact, brought democracy to any of these targeted nations, they have destroyed the lives and livelihood, living standards of these countries. Iraq today is an absolute dump compared to what it was before the U.S. went in Desert Storm. Same thing's going to happen to Iran. Yeah. Same thing with Libya, same thing with Tripoli. The aftermath of all these U.S. wars is desperation for the invaded people. And the same thing is happening up in Ukraine. Nobody benefits from wars except the bankers and the munitions makers.
Just to see the look on these filmmakers, faces as they, express their concern, because they really do put their lives on the line because it's indiscriminate. They just fire at anything that moves over there. And it's compelling. Just, you look at that filmmaker and he looks like he's, maybe 10 years older than his actual chronological age. It's really compelling.
Well, I just put the teaser up so that people can go on in there, and hopefully there'll be enough demand for it to be shown here in the U.S., but we know already certain inconvenient movies, books, never get seen here in the United States of America. I remember many years ago when I was working on a film project down in Australia, and I found a book called Operation Black Eagle, which was written by an American author, about the CIA's drug running through Central America to fund operations not approved by Congress. And it had a lot of detail about what was going on that dovetailed exactly with what I already knew about Iran-Contra, the airfield at Mina, Bill Clinton, and the rest of it. But there was a lot more detail, you know, especially about why they invaded Panama and threw Noriega in prison. It wasn't because he was a bad guy. It's because he was trying to blackmail Bush over what the U.S. had been doing in the drug trade. And I came back to the U.S. and I mentioned this book to some people, and they said, we've never heard of it. And sure enough, I checked. That book is impossible to find anywhere in the United States of America. I regret now giving away my one and only copy because I have not been able to find another one.
Just incredible. They just never stop. Why won't they just give it a break for 5 minutes?
Oh, because they're hearing voices in their head from their antidepressant drugs, and they think it's the voice of the imaginary playmate up in the sky saying, you will have imperishable glory and fame and wealth if you will lay waste to the surface of planet Earth.
It's just incredible. And we know nothing, you know. We know nothing about what happens after our death. So these people, you know, they don't know. They have no clue. And to just put all of this beautiful existence, you know, and ruin so many people's lives. For what?
For wealth and power and glory. These are sociopathic people. These are sociopathic people who cannot feel the pain they cause in others. That's it. It's a physical, mental defect that they can do what they do and absolutely not feel what's going on. You know, whether it's Henry Kissinger talking about military people being pawns, or Madeleine Albright saying that she didn't care how many Iraqi kids starved to death from the sanctions. It's not a number she's interested in. She's just after the prize. We want the names on the statues, and we want our place in the history books, and so forth and so on. They are psychotic.
I know, and we're so numb to it all now. It's difficult to express your indignation, you know.
All right, well, Dee, listen, I'm sorry to cut you off here, but we do have to take a break for the news here right now. Thank you very much for the phone call. We got 2 more callers waiting on the line, both named Steve, and please be patient. We'll be back to you as soon as the news is over. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We got 2 callers waiting. Going to get to you in just a second, but we're seeing these stories starting to come out of Iran, where Iran's political structure is not happy with this deal. And we're hearing from their defense minister that this idea of open inspections of non-nuclear sites is simply unacceptable, and he's right. We're hearing from the foreign minister that any restrictions on non-nuclear capable defensive missiles are outside the scope of the United Nations, and technically he's correct. The United Nations jurisdiction of its member nations is confined to weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons. Internal defense is not subject to UN rules. And so it looks like the Iran deal is already dead on arrival, which is exactly what Israel wanted, because it was Israel that lobbied the U.S. and France to add these last-second conditions, knowing they would be unacceptable to the Iranian government. And so now Israel's going to kick off a war with Iran. The U.S. will get dragged into it. We might see Russia and China come in on Iran's side, and the world war will be off and running that everybody seems to want, who owns stock in the defense contractors or a bank, or who's simply getting money directly under the table from Israel. And the ordinary people do not want war. We're sick and tired of seeing our kids coming back killed, crippled, or drugged out of their minds from these war zones. It is amazing. All right, let's grab a phone call. Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I got to say what a deal that is against Iran. 7 years, more sanctions continue. 25 for the next 25 years. They can come and do inspections anytime they want to. I mean, this is quite a scam. And I think what's going to happen here is that we're going to see Israel attack Iran, but that's going to send a dangerous precedent to other countries to say if you just feel like you want to, you suspect something, you can go ahead and attack another country. And of course, if they do so, and I think they will attack Iran, if we sit back and do nothing and we don't criticize and we don't step in and do something to go against Israel for doing this, it'll send a message to the world that Israel does own us. We're a puppet.
The world already knows that. The world already knows that. What is going to be the destructive force, though, is the recognition that the United Nations cannot constrain their member, Israel. And the United Nations will collapse. And you need to remember, going into World War II, you know, they had to basically trash the League of Nations, which was formed after World War I, so that this would never happen again. And after World War III is over, if there's anybody still alive, they'll form a new global governing body to guarantee peace into the future. And then when somebody decides it's time for World War IV, they'll undermine and collapse that. That's the repeating pattern. Because you cannot have private central banking without a repeating cycle of world wars to plunge the world back into debt, to destroy work product, so that no matter how hard ordinary people work, they can never have a standard of living higher than that which the bankers think they should be allowed to have. That's what's going on here.
You know, and also, this is a little bit off topic here, but we were talking about space exploration.
Yes.
You know, I've always suspected that NASA is just a cover for really what's going on. It's, you know, installing more spy satellites to monitor and spy on us, other countries, and weaponized space. I've always thought that was really going on.
No, the Pentagon has its own space program. It doesn't get a lot of attention. There's a bit of overlap. You know, I was at JPL when CSAT was first launched, and that was supposed to be a civilian oceanographic system, the first spaceborne imaging radar, and they discovered it could actually see where the ballistic missile submarines were traveling from the surface wakes they left behind. And so it was immediately grabbed and classified and so forth. So there is a great deal of overlap going on, but technically NASA is in charge of the civilian space exploration for publicity purposes, propaganda purposes. The real hardcore military stuff is being done at other places and under Pentagon control, and it doesn't get a lot of attention. There are two parallel space programs in this country.
Yeah, one last comment I want to make is that, you know, when you start looking at the situation of what Israel does and how we just stay complacent, we don't say anything, we don't condemn them for their illegal actions and what they do to the Palestinians or anybody else. You know, when you sit back and look at it, you got to say, why doesn't anybody stand up and say anything? And the only thing that comes to mind, Michael, is that we are being blackmailed in some way, whether it's 9/11 or whether it's Kennedy assassination. There is something definitely hanging over our heads that we don't want to confront Israel when they do wrong, because then the dirty details will come out of maybe we have our hands dirty on some other bad things. I just got a funny feeling that this is what keeps us silent. This is what keeps our government silent, is that they have some
there doesn't have to be a single cause. Yes, Israel could be blackmailing us over the Kennedy assassination. I think Israel's definitely blackmailing us over 9/11, but Israel also compromises our political elite, you know, on an individual basis. Remember when Bill Clinton was dealing with Monica Lewinsky, somebody had gotten tape recordings of their phone sex from the Watergate Hotel end, thereby bypassing the White House phone system security, and they were blackmailing Bill Clinton to shut the FBI's hunt down for Mega, which was the code name of Israel's top spy within America's political structure. A lot of people think it's Rahm Emanuel. So it goes on in an individual layer and then government as a whole. And behind it all, of course, we still have that unexplained radioactive signature around the Israeli consulate in New York, which Israel will not explain. Israel will not allow inspections because it's technically Israel state territory. But remember, Israel got the first round of weapons-grade uranium from here in the United States of America. And getting that material, that's the hard part to build a bomb. If you've got fissionable weapons-grade uranium, building a bomb is simple. It's a big tube. Half the critical mass in one side, half the critical mass on the other, slap them together, it goes bang, boom. There you all know how to build an atomic bomb. It would have been trivial for Israel to leave behind in the United States enough of that weapons-grade uranium that they stole from the United States to build one or two bombs which are currently located in strategic cities. And that could be the big hammer that they're holding over the U.S. government.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot here for the phone call. We're going to switch on over here to the other Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha, what's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to talk to you about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And did you hear that threat from El Chapo? He's threatening to kill Trump because what he's saying about immigrants.
You would think that this guy who just managed this amazing escape from prison would have other things on his mind. Maybe he was let go as part of a deal. If we'll arrange your escape with the little motorcycle and the lit tunnel and all the rest of it if you will do the hit on Donald Trump so that America's politicians who profit from Trump's removal can claim their hands are clean.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I think it's a precedent for if Trump gets too far ahead of himself and gets too popular that, he may be off.
I said that last week. They're already giving him the Ron Paul treatment, but if he decides to go independent, he's got enough money to run a credible campaign that he could win the White House. And if I think he gets close enough, forget the Ron Paul treatment, they'll give him the Robert Kennedy treatment. Because that's why Kennedy was shot after he won the California primary, and it was obvious they could not keep him out of the White House.
Now he's going at it with McCain as well. Which you have the point. McCain got captured, but
there's a lot of things wrong with McCain here, and I'm sorry that Trump got distracted by McCain. He walked into a bit of a trap, and I'm hoping he'll turn around and walk out of it. We got to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm going to skip on down my talking points. I had a lot more to talk about Israel and the war zone, but we are getting on to the show. And I want to talk about the economy, and I want to talk about what's going on with Donald Trump here. Now, as of this morning, the Greek banks did reopen after a 3-week shutdown. The actual real impact on the people of Greece is minimal because the restrictions on cash withdrawals will remain. They raised the ceiling a little tiny bit, enough to where they could say, we've raised the ceiling, but it's still not like the people of Greece can get their money out of the banks. Transfers to foreign countries are still being blocked. Yes, they can go into the lobby, but it's only a cosmetic improvement over what they were getting from the ATM machines. So still trouble there. Now, even though the Greek parliament defied their own people to approve this bailout deal, it is not complete because the other countries of the European Union who will be expected to pick up the costs from this still have to vote. And it is far from a done deal that they're going to go along with this thing. Germany doesn't like it. They'll probably vote for it, according to the last survey of their legislative body. Great Britain is already saying, we're not going to put any money into it. The IMF is on record saying this deal is absolutely unworkable. And this thing could fail at the European Union Parliament. Now, a lot of people are talking about how the core of this deal involves the transfer of Greek national assets into private hands. And it turns out most of these Greek assets, airports, airplanes, various other things, are being transferred into a fund managed by Germany's chief negotiator. So he just negotiated himself a great sweetheart deal. Yes, well, we'll arrange for more bailout money, but I get to take over control of these assets and sell them off as I see fit. And apparently the sale is underway. Warren Buffett is reported to have bought an entire Greek island, Agios Thomas, for 15 million euro. So he's got his own Greek island now. Used to belong to the people of Greece, but hey, they got suckered by that euro deal and the ink and paper and the debt-based economy. And now the country they used to own is being sold into private hands, coming soon to a town near you. We're all going to wind up Greeks. We're all going to wind up serfs. We're all going to wind up as tenants on nations that used to be our property. That's the goal of this private central banking model. To convince us that the bankers own the planet and we may live here only by their leave. It is a new feudalism. It really is here. Another article coming out of the Organic Prepper, just who's really paying for all this bailout? It's not coming out of the pockets of the bankers. They're basically just sliding the debt around all across the people of Europe. And the people of Europe understand that there is no deal possible for Greece that does not adversely affect themselves. Now, the former head of the IMF, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who more and more appeals to have been deliberately targeted for a sex scandal to get him out of power because he was starting to ask impertinent questions about where all the gold bullion had actually gone. That being said, he has come out saying this Greek deal is profoundly damaging to the future of Europe, calls it a deadly blow. It may be politically correct. It may make the bankers happy because they believe the fantasy of this deal they put together. But even the IMF is saying it can't actually work. There are protests and riots all across Greece. The various Greek fire departments dealt with 50 fires over this weekend that authorities think were arson as a protest to this betrayal of the Greek people by their own government. Since the Greek parliament ratified this deal, basically giving the European money junkies everything they wanted all along, it's triggered a refugee crisis. Greek people are leaving Greece. They're fleeing northward, looking for new homes where they're not going to be at least as deeply enslaved to the private central bankers. And it's not just confined to Greece. There were protests over this weekend in 14 German cities against Angela Merkel and the way Greece is being treated. Now, the Germans have got other reasons to be concerned. Germany is quietly starting to replace all of their bank plastic cards. And the difference in them is the ability to withdraw cash from your account is no longer on the card. You can get cash, but only as a loan from your credit card. Now, our cards here, it's an option. The plastic card can withdraw cash from your account, or it can be an advance against your credit card account. It tends to automatically go to the credit card unless you say, this is a cash withdrawal. But now the German people aren't going to have that. The German people could be away from their home. They've got their plastic card. They could have all kinds of cash in their account. They can't get it. They can only borrow the money at interest from their credit card. So you need to get your cash out of the banking system now while you still can and convert it to silver and gold or other fungible, negotiable, tangible goods that hold their value. Because we know that when the cash ban is implemented, at the same time they will have to ban gold and silver coins and bars. Otherwise, people will just take their money out of the bank and buy those. A ban on cash to keep the wealth in the bank only works if there are no other ways for you to store your wealth under your own control. And that means there has to be a gold and silver ban. Going to be a lot of happy wives around the world here as husbands start buying very expensive jewelry to decorate them with. The Mexican peso has now plunged to 16 per $1 US. This is a record low. They're in trouble down there. Barclays has announced they're going to cut 30,000 jobs. And according to the latest Pew report, the U.S. public pension system is underfunded by $1 trillion with a T. And we know why they're unfunded. Back in 2008, during the mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's pet rating agency said, oh yes, these mortgage bundles, they're AAA. And that made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. The fraud collapsed, the pensions are defunded, they can't keep their promises to their pensioners, and nobody's got the courage to stand up and say, look, this is Wall Street's fault. It's politically correct to turn around and say, oh, you old people, you're living too long, or like Jeb Bush, you should just be willing to work more hours in the week, and everything's going to be just fine. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, I want to spend a little time talking about Donald Trump here, who is a refreshing breath of honesty and forthrightness in the cesspool of modern presidential politics. And as I mentioned to that caller before, we're already seeing Donald Trump get the Ron Paul treatment. Now, if you remember back in 2008, 2012, Ron Paul came out and he started talking about what was really going on with this country, the real issues. And immediately, the political machine of both parties and Wall Street and the corporate media came out to just say, oh, you don't want to listen to him. He's talking about the economy. You want to be concerned about gay marriage and abortion rights and feminism and all that other stuff. Those are the things that you should be thinking. You will think about those. You will not think about the war and the economy. And they gave Ron Paul the old heave-ho. The corporate media would always frame the debate so that he was off camera. I mean, it was that blatant. And they locked him out of the convention, even though, demonstrably, looking at the photos of all of his rallies, he had a huge grassroots support. Remember when Mitt Romney was having to Photoshop the pictures of his rallies to make it look like some people had showed up? And they're starting to do the same thing to Donald Trump here. Over at the Huffington Post, they have declared by imperial edict they will not be covering Donald Trump as politics. We're not going to legitimize him by treating him as a potential candidate for the presidency, even though he happens to be leading the GOP polls. Huffington Post is going to decide for you that you shouldn't look at the Don. You should be looking at Jeb Bush or any of those other people who play the game correctly. And so Huffington Post is basically out there trying to manufacture the campaign before it even really gets underway. Donald Trump basically fired back at them, calling them a blog, which I don't like the fact that Donald Trump looks at what we do in a diminutive way, but in the case of Huffington Post, they deserve it. And, yeah, Huffington Post shows they're already trying to do the Ron Paul treatment of Donald Trump. And it could very well backfire because we all remember what the machine did to Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012. And we recognize up front that's what they're trying to do to Donald Trump. They can't deal with the fact that he's leading the GOP polls. Absolutely, they do not want the American people to have their own candidate that they like. No. We have to get rid of Donald Trump by hook or crook or bullet or whatever it's going to take, and you will choose from our pre-selected, puppets for your next ruler so that nothing really changes. We can't let the bankers be upset. We can't let Israel be upset. We can't let the war machine be upset. The American people choosing their own leaders? Where'd you get such a stupid idea? Actually, from the Constitution. Speaking of which, we linked back to the video that Judge Napolitano did that got him fired from Fox News. And you watch that video, and you can understand why Fox News fired him. And you can understand Judge Napolitano is definitely one of the good guys. And I think Donald Trump would be well advised to bring the good judge onto his campaign staff. It's time for some truth tellers in this nation. And the liars are going to do whatever they can to stay in power. But if we don't get these liars out of our government, we will go on seeing our children killed and crippled in wars of conquest. We'll continue to see this policy of mercantilism where the government decides for you what products you will buy and who you will buy them from. Now, Marco Rubio is out there trying to make a big deal about the comments on McCain, saying that this alone should disqualify Trump from the presidency. Actually, no, I've read the requirements for the office of the presidency, and kissing the butt of the current power structure is not in there. So Rubio is way out of line on this one. Now, everyone is trying to come down and on McCain's side. McCain was going to be the attacker on Trump, and Trump wasn't going to back down, turned on him, and they're you can't say that. John McCain is a war hero. Well, Trump made a valid point. McCain isn't a war hero. He got captured. Okay, that does not make you a war hero. It makes you a war victim. I'll grant you that, but that doesn't make you a war hero. And by the way, current polling is showing 88% of Americans agree John McCain betrayed his supporters, the veterans, the POWs, and the country as a whole. Now, Trump is getting distracted into this whole thing about McCain, and I think Trump would be well advised to just drop the matter, go back to immigration or the economy or the wars, and just go on telling the truth about what's going on. Because we don't need to get into an endless argument about McCain. We can forget McCain being captured. We can forget that they surrendered to be captured. We can forget about McCain crashing 5 U.S. warplanes while he was a pilot, which I think qualifies him as an enemy ace. We can forget about that disaster on the Forrestal and the subsequent cover-up of that. We can forget about McCain's daddy, the Admiral, covering up for Israel when they attacked the USS Liberty. We can forget all about that. All you need to remember about John McCain is that he thought Sarah Palin would make a good vice president. And on the basis of that, what McCain has to say about Donald Trump should be ignored. The man does not have the brains it takes to be where he is. He's there through family connection and a multi-generational subservience to almighty Israel. And that's all it takes to be a leader here in the United States of America. Now, Hillary Clinton is continuing to make some very stupid moves that the corporate media is beginning to scratch their head and say, what the heck is going on here? Because apparently at an event they had in Iowa this last weekend, the Hillary Clinton campaign forbid the young volunteers from talking to the press. Don't talk to the press. And these are people who think the sun rises and sets around Hillary, that she is goddess Athena come to earth or whatever it is. And the campaign is saying nobody talks to the press. They're already getting paranoid about what's going on. Maybe they're concerned that some of the media are getting ready to ask questions about just what Hillary has been up to that they don't want to have to answer. I'm working on an article right now that's basically going down some of these things that most Americans have forgotten. The fact that Hillary Clinton claimed she was named after Sir Edmund Hillary following the Everest summit, except that Hillary Clinton was 5 years old when Sir Edmund Hillary reached the top of Everest. It's a mild, trivial thing, but it shows she's willing to lie about everything. She got fired from the Watergate Committee for being a liar. She was refused a letter of recommendation because of her poor job performance. Cattlegate, the missing Rose Law Firm billing records, all these strange appointments that Hillary was in charge of when Bill Clinton came to the White House that didn't work out. Hillary was the one who said, we've got to have a female attorney general. And the first 2 names she suggested had to withdraw their names when political embarrassments surfaced. Hillary was the one who brought for her former law partners from Arkansas, Webb Hubbell, Vince Foster, and William Kennedy, to positions in the Justice Department, the White House staff, and the Treasury. Didn't work out very well. Hubbell went to jail, Foster was murdered, and Kennedy was forced to resign. The Travelgate firings, the sicking of the IRS on Billy Dale, her book, It Takes a Village, which portrayed this complete socialist government in charge of your children agenda, and on and on and on. I'm working on getting that out there this week. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back with more about American politics. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. We've had some callers waiting. Unfortunately, the little display on my machine that tells me callers are here keeps locking up. Time Warner just came out and said, we're upgrading your neighborhood. Here's a new 300 megabits per second modem, which delivers about 170 megabits per second, and certain pieces of software, my Secure Shell into the server and this Comrex stack thing, keep locking up. I want my old, reliable, dependable modem back. I didn't even ask for the speed game. This is another case of, you've got to have the latest and greatest. And I'm doing a web search all over, and everybody's got this problem. It's another classic case of the latest whiz-bang being thrown out into the marketplace, and nobody really tested it. You guys will figure it out sooner or later. Really? I don't have the time to do that. I'm trying to do radio, and I'm getting seriously ticked off with this corporate arrogance of, we'll put out junk, you're expected to just fix it. And stop whining and complaining, or the terrorists will win. All right, then. Steve in Florida. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I've been getting an update for or an upgrade for Windows 10, and it's like I don't want it.
I don't want it either. I mean, they're saying we'll give it to me for free, but the problem with that, besides all the NSA spyware, is the fact that my current software that runs on Windows 7 won't run on Windows 10. It's just a way of forcing you to have to go buy the latest and greatest version so that the computer hardware and software companies make the money off of your work, not you. Because you're always having to be forced to take the money that you're earning with your labor and give it to them for new software.
Right. I can't imagine Windows giving anything away. I figured it was a trap. But you were talking about Donald Trump being Ron Paul.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I was really young, Mike. You're a couple of years older than I am. But didn't they do the same thing to Ross Perot?
They sure did. They sure did.
Okay.
There was another third-party candidate, I'm blanking on his name, John, began with an A, who was doing really, really well. And they did the same thing to him. The corporate media trashed him, smeared him, said, you can't take this guy seriously. He's a nut. He's a kook. If he was legit, he would be part of the official two-party system. And, they just went after him. And we're seeing exactly the same thing with Trump. And I got to tell you, the more the corporate media is pounding on Trump, the more I feel like I have to support him. And
oh yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Aloha. I just came back from the gym, from the Gold's Gym, and although I noticed on every one of these TVs they're doing nothing but viciously attacking Trump because of the, remarks about McCain. I got no use for McCain. I mean, he to me, whatever, heroics he may have engaged in when he was in the military, has been negated now by, he's actually betraying this country.
I don't know what heroics he was supposed to do. I mean, he got captured. He crashed 5 aircraft. There was the Forrestal incident. He's been manufactured as a hero in support of his political campaign. But I'm hard-pressed to find anything that he has himself done that warrants this kind of adulation.
Well, I mean, supposedly he was tortured when he was in the...
Well, that's what we're being told, but what we're hearing from others who were there with him is he was treated like royalty. Because his father was an admiral and there was some kind of a back-channel deal made. There are other people who were prisoners with McCain who said he basically told the North Vietnamese everything they wanted.
Has actually other POWs have come forward and said that about him?
Yeah, but of course the corporate media ignores them. But you can do a search out on the web, for the truth about McCain's time as a POW. And again, the official story about McCain is coming from the same source as the official story about Saddam's nuclear weapons and the rest of it. So of course we're going to ignore it and dismiss it.
Well, I did see something on Veterans for Truth that there was a sergeant major who had actually been in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and he says, I forget his name now, but he said that McCain is basically full of it, that he betrayed the other soldiers and stuff.
Well, the government and the media are basically treating the Veterans for Truth the same way they treated the USS Liberty survivors. You're an embarrassment to the official story, therefore we have to dismiss you and degrade you and insult you. And I think, hopefully, in this day and age, most people are coming to understand when the government and the media go on the attack against a particular group or a particular individual, that group or individual is somebody you need to be paying attention to.
But do you think that Trump will be able to ride this out, or do you think his poll numbers are going to start falling because of this?
I got to tell you, he's already doing better in the polls than I was expecting he was going to do. I think he's hit the nerve in the American people where we're just sick and tired of nonstop lies and bovine excrement, and people are willing to overlook his perceived shortcomings just for the fact that at least we're going to get some semblance of truth out of this guy, that he's got the cojones to actually deal with the real problems of this nation and not just try and keep us all distracted with Confederate flags and, women's rights and the gay marriage and all the other fringe issues that have become a permanent decor around every campaign season.
And one thing, too, about Trump, I think our relations with Russia would improve 100%. He said he's got a good relationship with Putin, and I don't think he looks at Putin as the evil incarnate that the rest of the mainstream media, the politicians, and all that. So I think that would be a plus.
Well, I'm supporting Trump right now, if for no other reason than he is stirring up the pot and he's forcing these other politicians to deal with the issues that are really of importance to America, like this illegal immigration and attendant crime problem. As I said, the media and the government are already giving him the Ron Paul treatment. And yes, if Trump really starts doing good, I suspect they'll do the Robert Kennedy treatment of him. So they're not going to let him sit in the White House. But, until he's gotten rid of, I think it's important to give him as much attention as possible, because he is forcing these other politicians to talk about what's going on. He's not letting them hide out behind these manufactured fringe issues.
Well, that's one thing. He's got to hire his own security and good security. One thing about Bobby Kennedy, they didn't have not the Secret Service any good anyway, but he used people like, ex-football players like Rosie Greer and ex-track stars like Rafer Johnson, who are, they're in great shape and everything like that, but they're not security experts. He's got to hire real top-notch security that know what they're doing. And
see, Bobby Kennedy thought the Los Angeles Police Department was going to protect him because as a candidate, he was not entitled to Secret Service protection. When the CIA decides they're going to get somebody, the police departments will turn around and, go along with it because, hey, they all dream of becoming a CIA agent and,
Well, that's why I say he's got to make sure to get his own security, private security that are loyal to him.
Yeah, well, he can afford it. He can afford it.
Yeah, that's exactly, and he's got to do that. That's a necessity. The other thing is, he's the one guy I think would go after Mrs. Slick Willie if she does become the nominee, because as far as Vince Foster and some of the other murderers around the Clinton, because he did go after Obama about his birth certificate, which I believe is still a forgery. I believe that.
Well, yeah, but that's something I think Trump would be well advised to steer clear of. Yes, the birth certificate is a forgery, but not for the reason Trump thinks it is. Obama was born here in Hawaii. The reason for the forged birth certificate is Obama's real father is a guy named Frank Marshall Davis. Yeah. I know. Obama is the 1960s love child, and it's a moot point. And I hope Trump will not get sucked into that one again. But they're laying minefields all over for him.
But I mean, as far as Mrs. Slick Willie and Clinton, as far as I still believe that Foster was murdered.
Yes.
And they probably, if I had to guess, the Russian mob was very strong at that time and they had connections to Clinton. I would guess that they hired the Russian mob to take care of Foster.
Not really. Foster was killed inside the White House and his body smuggled out through the Treasury tunnel. And there's a lot of reasons to think that. If you look at my Foster page, you'll see the evidence. I don't think the Russian mob had anything to do with it. This was purely an internal hit, using the same methods they used back there in Arkansas. Anyway, Mark, got to let you go. We got to take another break for the news here. And we'll be coming on back for hour number 3 talking more about politics. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And over the news break, I went prowling around the forum over at Time Warner Oceanic and see how these companies save money so they can give their executives bonuses is they fire their own quality assurance team. And they set up a forum where you can log in and figure this all out for yourself when stuff doesn't work. And I found a thread where people are starting to talk about this. This 300 megabits per second modem upgrade is breaking services all over the place. And what I'm seeing going on down the list are no solutions, but a lot of guessing. Turn this off, turn that on. Maybe you should do this, try this, look for this, move the cables around, spit on the end of the connector, stomp on it and put it back in the connect. They don't know. They actually don't know. And apparently they don't care. Now, getting on, and then we wonder why we can't compete with the rest of the world. Lame, just lame. Anyway, getting on back to Hillary Clinton. Apparently over the weekend, Senator Elizabeth Warren was speaking at a meeting for progressive organizers, and she basically threw down the glove to all the candidates, but specifically toward Hillary, to basically distance themselves from all these Wall Street banks. That it's time to break up the too big to fail, too big to jail banks, and to stop taking their money. Now, as far as Hillary's concerned, that's a non-starter, because while Hillary is out there trying to present the image that she is just plain folks like the rest of us, she is in fact one of the largest recipients of the generous support of the biggest of the Wall Street firms. And because Hillary does not really represent the American people, if she doesn't have that money from Wall Street, she doesn't have a campaign. Because she's not getting support from ordinary Americans, other than token amounts, so they can say, see, the people love me. Now, Bernie Sanders is continuing to get unexpectedly large crowds at his town hall forums. In fact, they were talking about this get-together up in Maine where they were expecting a few hundred people. And they had to delay the start trying to fit everybody in. The crowd wound up at above 8,000 people showing up for Bernie Sanders. And Hillary's probably already hiring Mitt Romney's Photoshop artist to try and make her crowds look larger. Remember that embarrassment from a couple of weeks ago where they had a big space all set up and they were going to sell the tickets for $100 to $300 to come in and actually see the divine Miss Hillary up there on the stage. And as they got closer to the start time and realized they were looking at empty chairs, they sent campaign workers out on the streets to give the tickets away for free. Come on, get on in there, sit in front of the camera, make sure the camera can see you. All right, we're going to grab a quick phone call. Robert in Arizona. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I'm really torn. I know that Donald Trump, he's really making some good comments, and he's out there like bringing issues up ahead. But he's also openly saying he wants to just bomb all the Iraqi oil fields and take that money back from the ISIS, whoever they are. And he's also got most of his worth is in dollars. So why would he want to end the corporate state that is America right now?
Well, I'm sure Donald could transfer his wealth into some other denomination as soon as it suits me. Now, I know a lot of the people who are trying to come after Donald Trump are doing it on the basis of past political statements that he's made, but it's important to understand that what Donald has been saying is really what a lot of other people were saying anyway, so it really is a moot point. I've had a lot of people write to me and say, oh, well, Donald says he's a friend of Israel. Well, yeah, they all say they're a friend of Israel. Okay? I mean, find me a candidate who is not a friend of Israel, and I'll change my support to them. So, let's do a push. And Donald is being a politician. But right now, what he's doing is finding an audience with the American people. He's leading in the polls. He's scaring the heck out of the political establishment. They're trying to figure out some way they can get rid of him without it being obvious to the American people that that's exactly what they're doing. Getting rid of a real candidate so that once again we are forced to choose from an array of pre-selected, pre-approved puppets. Okay?
Yeah. I also think that maybe they're bringing this military issue with McCain into focus because also during that interview he mentioned that Donald Trump mentioned that he's paid off both sides, both political parties, and they do what he asked them to do.
He who? Trump or McCain?
Trump said he's given money to both sides, and they do what he asked them to do.
Well, that's actually a good comment for Trump to be making here right now because he's hammering home the point that's how the American political system is played. These big Wall Street banks and firms, they're making donations to all the candidates, so it doesn't matter how you vote, Wall Street will still get what it's want. Israel is donating to all the candidates. Big Pharmaceutical is donating to all the candidates. They tend to give more money to the ones they think are more likely to win, but they're still buying all the candidates in order to completely render the election process itself irrelevant. Whoever wins is still going to be their puppet. And the one thing that Donald has going for him is he's got enough of his own money where he doesn't have to do that. In fact, that's the issue he should really be hitting. You know, rather than McCain or birth certificate and everything, is just to say, I've got too much money to be for sale to anybody.
Well, I think they're trying to, just bring the issue with McCain up because he did mention that, politicians are bought and paid for every day.
Well, it's a valid comment to make, and I think they're trying to go after Trump with McCain's perceived star power, but I don't think McCain's star power is as great as they like to imagine it is. Like I said earlier in the show, all you need to know about John McCain is he thought Sarah Palin was going to make a good vice president. And that's all you need to know about McCain. Okay?
I laughed so hard when I heard that. Have a good day, Michael.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Now then, up in Wisconsin, there's a big stink going on because as soon as Scott Walker declared that he was running for the White House, there was this investigation into campaign financing irregularities when Walker was dealing with the attempted recall. Apparently he broke some rules and there was an investigation. And as soon as he declared for president, the Wisconsin Supreme Court arbitrarily declared there's no case here and threw it out. Okay, and the big stink now is that many of the members of that state Supreme Court have the same financial backers as Scott Walker. Imagine my shock. It really is corrupted all the way from top to bottom. Now, Scott Walker is having a little bit of a debate with Jeb Bush regarding a war with Iran. And Scott Walker is out there saying that, if he wins the White House, he's going to be prepared to take aggressive military action on the very first day he's in that Oval Office. And Jeb Bush is taking a somewhat calmer tone, saying that he might wait till day number 2 to start war with Iran. So once again, they're putting up the candidates who are going to support the agenda. War with Iran, the exact starting date doesn't really matter. Hillary's already out there saying, yes, we're going to go after Iran. Okay, now then, filmmaker Laura Poitras is now suing the United States government over a campaign of harassment she has endured ever since her documentary, Citizen 4, came out. This is the documentary about Edward Snowden and the leaks from the NSA, which has been a huge embarrassment to the United States government. And, of course, the U.S. government isn't doing anything about all these NSA people violating the Constitution, but they are abusing and harassing those who talk about it, and now the filmmaker is suing. And I hope she wins. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to step back and pick up some of the stories that we skipped over before to get down to the economy and Donald Trump here. Apparently, the Israeli army made an incursion into Syria and targeted a refugee camp. Now, this was in an area that is supposed to be a border buffer zone under the control of the United Nations. But Israel just cruised on in and attacked this refugee camp full of the Syrian people. For whatever reason, we don't know. Now, here's an interesting story. This is over in Haaretz. ISIS is suspected of a car bombing of Hamas and Islamic Jihad men in Gaza. ISIS went into Gaza and they attacked Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Isn't it kind of funny how we're seeing all the time this evil Islamic ISIS never attacks Israel, but is always attacking Israel's enemies in Gaza and Syria? Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Now, over in western Iraq, Iraq forces downed an ISIS spy drone and discovered that it was made in Israel, which I think explains what's going on over with ISIS attacking Israel's enemies, but never Israel itself. ISIS is working for them, which makes Israel a state sponsor of terror. Because if ISIS is a terrorist group and Israel is supporting them, kind of undermines that whole caterwauling we hear from Tel Aviv about how Iran is a state sponsor of terror. Well, so's Israel. It's a push. So's the U.S. because the U.S. is supporting ISIS. With all that gun running from Libya up to Syria. Now, apparently there was a terror attack that blew up in a rally in the Turkish border town of Suruk, leaving at least 28 people dead, wounded 100 others. So things are kicking up over there. Now, Cuban President Raul Castro, as part of this whole normalization that's going on, says it's time for the United States to return Guantanamo Bay to Cuba's control. And, yeah, why not? The U.S. only hung on to Guantanamo Bay because of a lease signed with Batista, just to annoy Fidel Castro, after the Cuban people kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler Batista. Outside of being a convenient place to hide the torturing of prisoners of war by the United States, Guantanamo serves no real purpose. It's used as punishment duty. You know, if you misbehave, you're going to go to Guantanamo or Diego Garcia or Adak, Alaska. It doesn't really serve any U.S. military purpose whatsoever. They just hung on to it out of spite. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. The last week we were talking about all these scientists come forward to say that the latest studies of sun's solar cycles shows there's going to be an overlap coming in the next 10 years that is going to bring with it a new mini ice age, and immediately everybody who's getting funding for global warming is out there saying, don't be ridiculous. It's not a factor. It's not going to mean anything whatsoever. All that stuff about the Thames River freezing over and the frost fair, that's it. They just made that up here. Michael Mann is on the warpath saying that the sun doesn't control climate on Earth. It's all the fault of men. And they're launching a new PR blitz on this over at Common Dreams, and I got to tell you, I lost a lot of respect for Common Dreams running this story, where they're out there saying, smashing all previous records, 2015 on track to be the hottest year yet, and scientists say 2016 will be worse. The planet Earth, with mankind's help, is leapfrogging into sweltering new territory. No, 1936 was hotter than 2015. The medieval warming period was a lot warmer than 2015. The Roman warm period was a lot warmer than 2015. And this article is relying on data coming from NOAA, a government agency, who has been told, come up with data supporting human-caused global warming because we got to get a carbon tax. So meanwhile, back in the real world, they are having a heck of a time down under. Over in New South Wales, big freeze causes snowfalls from Goulburn to Katoomba. They're saying that this is a deep freeze not seen for 20 years. It's closed the roads, closed schools and services. Huge, huge problem. Australia's Sunshine State covered in snow during record cold snap, coldest winter weather in decades. Another article out of the Investment Watch blog, the biggest snowfall since 1984 has hit. The ice is so bad it's interfering with their civil aviation. They can't keep the runways clean. Now here in the northern hemisphere, over in Denmark, their meteorologists are saying that the cold, miserable July that they've had so far, well, that's kind of setting the tone because the normal summer warmth that Denmark gets doesn't seem to be happening. In fact, the words they used was nowhere in sight. Now remember, last summer, year ago, was the summer that Al Gore promised us all the Arctic would be completely ice-free. Didn't happen. The Arctic sea ice volume showed a strong recovery in 2013. It was growing, not shrinking. And at the moment, it's continuing to track the ice coverage from 2006, where it was very thick with a wide extent. The capital of Greenland, is having their coldest year since 1993. But NOAA's out there saying, oh, 2015 is the hottest year on record. It's broiling. It's warm. Next year will be worse. If you don't pay a carbon tax, you're all going to die horribly. And by the way, over this last weekend, here in Hawaii, we had a snowstorm on the Big Island. July, people, just for those of you who are listening to this on replay. Yes, we had a big blizzard on the Big Island last winter. This is the dead of summer, July 2015. We got snow on the Big Island. I'm sure Al Gore's out there saying that's not snow, that's global warming dust. But these liars who are pushing all of these hoaxes, they are shameless, they are unrepentant. They are trapped by their funding that says you will convince the public the world is getting warmer and it's their fault. Or they're trapped by their own reputation because they got suckered into Al Gore's hoax and now they can't admit that they were wrong. And even when scientists who are not on the payroll of the carbon Nazis are going public saying, look, solar activity dominates the climate, solar activity is in decline, it's going to get cold, and you immediately get all of the carbon Nazis out there saying, these scientists are nonsense, they're not part of our consensus, it's ridiculous to think that the sun controls the Earth's climate. That's what Michael Mann is out there saying. They never quit. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, over in Great Britain, and this is in the context of California and now Florida, passing laws saying your children will get these 30 to 40 mandatory vaccines before they're allowed in public school. The British government has arrived at a settlement regarding 800 children who were damaged by the swine flu vaccine, suffered permanent brain damage. And these 800 children are going to divide $90 million in compensation from the British government, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking about having your entire life crippled for you, it's really not all that much. The part that annoys me is the taxpayers are picking up the tab for the damage the vaccine companies caused. Why aren't the vaccine companies financially liable for the damage their products cause? There's something wrong with that. Now, there's a new study out showing that GMO soy accumulates and stores the cancer-causing chemical formaldehyde. It is a known carcinogen, but it's a very popular molecule with manufacturers. And while there have been laws to limit formaldehyde exposure for little tiny kids, you cannot use formaldehyde-based glues in children's shoes anymore, it's still open season on all the adults. And it's not just the fact that it's a carcinogen. For people who are sensitive to it, it can cause a lot of other problems, including serious crippling joint pain, which Claire had to go through. And the problem with formaldehyde sensitivity is it makes you more sensitive to other chemical contaminants. But it's still being used because it's this wonderful self-polymerizing molecule. And they put it in cosmetics, they put it in cleaning products, and this is embalming fluid, by the way, okay, that they're talking about. And now there's the study that for some reason GMO soy hangs on to these embalming fluid molecules so that you will eat them. Wonderful stuff out there. Okay, Microsoft has just issued yet another emergency patch for another exploit linked to what's called the Hacking Team. This is a professional company in Europe that makes and sells hacking tools for repressive regimes around the world, including the U.S. government. And apparently some of the information that is being leaked out of Hacking Team, because apparently the security on their own server wasn't very good. They had plans in conjunction with Boeing to develop a drone with a Wi-Fi port that would just fly overhead, looking for open Wi-Fi ports and planting spyware on your home computer. This is all being paid for with your tax dollars, and all of it, of course, if not outright criminal entry, it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, there are laws that do make it a crime to break into other people's database. But, of course, the government's above the law. The laws are just for you little people. You little people have to obey all these laws. We don't. So forth and so on. I put up an article early today over from techjonathangardner.net, Why Java Sucks. And it was sent to me by a reader who was familiar with all of the travails I have been going through trying to get a new version of the What Really Happened website up and running. And I've abandoned Drupal 7. It is eating itself from within, and I don't know why. And I spent this entire last weekend, 13, 14 hours a day, trying to deal with this. I tried to install a commercially sold PHP debugging tool, and at the end of these 2 days, could not get it to work because of all the security constraints on the networking and on Windows 7, and so I just wasted that money, and I wasted the entire weekend. I spent a lot of money, I did a lot of work, and I accomplished absolutely nothing at all in the context of making my website better. And this is why the United States is unable to compete with the rest of the world. Our computer industry has become so junked up and decadent, we can't even fix it anymore. And when I put up this article about why Java sucks, the comment I made is you can go to a web search engine and you can type in why any software platform at all sucks, and you will get a ton of results. Everyone's in such a rush to get the stuff out there, they're not concerned if it works or not. I've been spending all these commercial breaks over at the Time Warner forum, and apparently a lot of people are getting hit with this problem with the 300 megabits per second modem, and nobody's got a clue why. No idea. Everybody's guessing. We've lost control of our own technology. And that's why the U.S. is losing its leadership in IT between that and the NSA scandal. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Doing okay.
I'm getting in late to the show. I'm just getting home. I was wondering if you covered anything on Stephen Harper. I don't,
Not today.
Did, but well, here's what the Tories have done. They've issued tax credits, child tax credits, in the amount of $500 per child.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, we don't have the money for it. So it's got that two-pronged effect where, of course, hey, vote for me. Also, it makes the third quarter numbers look a little better come election time in October.
Yeah, well, we see that here in the U.S. I mean, there's always a big outpouring of money for infrastructure repair just before the election to get all the unions working and happy so they'll vote the incumbents back in. And then 6 months after the election, whatever they've repaired is falling apart again.
Yeah, the same thing happens up here. I mean, we have one road not far from where I live, and it's done in concrete and a whole bunch of recycled tires, like shredded tires. And the road, it's been there for over 15 years, and it's beautiful. All the other roads they're repairing, you think they'd use the same technology, but no, they go right back to the asphalt on gravel, and of course,
we can't have roads that actually last in this country. We keep the unions would be unhappy because they're not getting to redo the same work over and over again every 6 months. We have a stretch of highway down here at the bottom of the hill, and it's only been made worse by this light rail development. But it seems like literally twice a year they'll go in and resurface it. And then immediately the potholes start forming again. Big chunks of the road drop out because they haven't put down a proper foundation with correct drainage for the road. It's just, cover it over with another layer of whatever, and it keeps the unions happy and voting Democratic. And it really is. And we have the worst roads in the entire country, according to the National Transportation Administration.
Wow. I don't know what to say, it's horrible, but, hopefully things fall apart and we can get our countries back Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go here. And, I remember one time when I was still teaching over at UH, and I was driving down the H1 through Honolulu, and all of a sudden in front of me, big chunk of concrete flies up in the air, followed by this rod, the pre-stressing or whatever. I mean, that's how poorly it's built. It's not built to survive salt air. They just put the stuff out there. I mean, it was a big scandal several years ago where some of the light poles were falling over because they'd used the wrong bolts and they'd corroded in the salt air. All right, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and last segment of our program today. And before I get back to these last few stories, I have had the Fox News Channel on for the entire duration of my radio program, and actually considerably before that, because I'm, trying to keep an eye on the lies they're putting out here today. Every time I look over to this set, they're talking about why the Iran deal is bad, why we've got to go to war with Iran. They're out there just, war Iran, war Iran. They ought to be replaying that videotape of John McCain going, bomb, 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 bomb Iran. I'm being so funny. Anyway. Now, somebody, one of our members just posted an article to the members page about public reaction to Drew Paul, underscoring the fact that I'm not the only person who is very unhappy with the quality of the software that's out there, and how difficult it's become for individuals to accomplish anything whatsoever, which may be intentional. If you remember the original version of the movie Rollerball with James Caan, the theme of that movie, and in fact the book that it was taken from, was a society that was intentionally designed to rule out the possibility of individual achievement, to discourage people from trying to do something on their own instead of being a cog in the giant corporate machine. And certainly it does seem as if the modern state of software development, at least regarding the Internet, is in such a shape where it's ideally suited for government or corporate departments of 10 or 20 people to put things together. But for individuals to just really, we're swamped with so many different things: HTML, SQL, PHP, JavaScript, Perl, Ajax, and on and on and on. Not to mention the communications protocols, which is why I think they can't actually figure out why these new 300 megabit per second modems are working. Because there's all this layering and layering and layering on top for security, this and the rest of it. And it's just gotten so complicated, it's paralyzed. It's decadent. It really, really is. And so I reprised an article I wrote some years ago. Our nation depends on restoring product liability. And I made the point that if you study the history of ancient Rome, leading to its eventual collapse, Rome pioneered many new technologies on its path to being the supreme power over their portion of the world. The invention of concrete, improved metallurgy, medicine, hygiene, plumbing, sewage, viniculture, for those of you who go that way. And Rome became dependent on them. And then when Rome went into decline, they lost their ability to maintain those technologies, and they began to fail and fall apart. Aqueducts stopped delivering water. Public health failed. Metal corroded. Concrete cracked. And all these systems Rome had become dependent on collapsed and hastened Rome's fall. And we're seeing the same thing with our computer infrastructure. And yes, there is a corporate desire to turn the Internet into just another content delivery platform. To heck with this whole blogging public awareness thing. And by the way, there's apparently a push to outlaw hot linking on the Internet. Now, hot linking is what the World Wide Web was all about. And now they're saying, no, we need to do away with hot linking. The new model is we will produce and sell to you one way, no feedback, no crosstalk. They really are trying to take the world back to as it was in the 1950s and 1960s. And because product liability has gone away in this country, especially in the software industry. Companies have no incentive to try and make sure their products actually work before putting them on the marketplace, which is how we get GM cars with ignition switches that shut off the engine, Range Rovers that unlock the doors at random, the Prius that shuts off at random intervals. We're seeing all these stories coming along. This is supposed to be the height of our technological age, and we can't keep the stuff running. I notice there's a big new advertising push out there for the Apple Watch about what great things it will do and how you're just not hip and trendy if you don't have an Apple Watch. And the sales for that are off because this economy can't support a lot of decoration, which is what the Apple Watch is. Marketing research has shown that the people who have an Apple Watch, they're not using the exercise health stuff that much. The vast majority are just using it to get notifications from their phone without pulling the phone out. And you can get that functionality with a Samsung digital watch for only $20. Anyway, speaking of infrastructure, up on Interstate 10 connecting Arizona to Southern California, they had a bridge collapse. And I actually saw one report that said heavy rains caused by human-caused global warming overloaded the bridge. Really? Did the bridge not have adequate drainage? No, basically what it is, we have hundreds of bridges in this country which are deemed at risk because they have not been maintained and cared for because all the money is going out to prop up Wall Street, fund the wars of conquest, give to Israel, feeding all the illegal immigrants, and there's nothing left over. And the last word I got is they don't have the resources to repair the bridge. They're just going to block off the highway and say, drive around the long way. That's it. Another indicator that we are a failing empire, as it were. Now then, interesting little article came out in Der Spiegel in Germany. This is a major German media outlet, confirming once again that the Dolphin-class submarines given by Germany to Israel as war reparations do in fact carry nuclear-tipped missiles. They're on the submarines. It's not a possibility. These submarines are armed with nuclear missiles, and the German government has known about it all along. So anybody who's out there saying, well, we don't really know if Israel's a nuclear-armed state, maybe they have a war ahead, but what are they going to do with it? They're already deployed. They're out there. Israel is the danger, not Iran. A little bit of bad news from the Philae lander on Comet 67P. Because the comet is getting closer to the sun, it's starting to outgas. Rosetta, the orbiter, has been forced to basically back away in order to avoid damage from the debris coming off the comet, and as a result, it is now out of range of the Philae lander. They're kind of hoping that on the other side of perihelion, they're going to be able to move back in closer and pick up some data packets, but at the moment, it's a little bit dark. Now, we talked a while ago about the Solar Impulse 2. This is an airplane solar-powered that is trying to fly around the world. It arrived here in Hawaii a little while ago. I was supposed to get an invitation to come on down and video the landing. I didn't get it. It turns out that there's some issues. The batteries on board the aircraft have suffered major irreversible damage during the leg across the Pacific. And they're saying it's going to be months before they can get the aircraft in the air and complete the flight sometime next spring. I'm still hoping I can get an invite to go over and photograph the thing on the ground. We're now starting to see a renewed effort against the preppers. Up in Canada, their largest private survival bunker, the Ark, which was featured in TV shows like The End of the World, How to Survive Armageddon, is now being threatened with government action to shut it down because it's not plugged into the grid, it's not using the city water, it's not using the corporate-provided whatever. And I think this is a concerted effort to simply erase the idea of independence from everybody's mind. Same reason they're going after the Confederate flag, the American Revolution Gadsden flag. They're trying to create an environment in which The mere idea of independence is unthinkable. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Go ahead and get angry. It's time. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.